Chapter 42 The Marriage Feast. When I rose up from the forest, I was curious about the path forward. Now what was it that I would walk towards? There were so many ways and paths to take, and as I reflected upon why I started, why I was in search of my true lover. Journeying ahead, the progression of the story brought about a transformation. And so I had gone the distance in the spirit of union, so that I could marry the golden maiden. Now as I pictured her, how I first met her when she journeyed across the sea, why I let her slip away, only because my higher nature was still fast asleep. It might be fair to say that I got a glimpse of her even when I was sleeping, but I wasn't fully present with her. For whatever the situation or story might explain, at that point, I was not quite ready for our truest union to occur. Now through the journey of transformation, something happened, and now I felt like a totally different man. Why, I was far different than the person she once met, and I was not even close to who I was when I began. And so I wondered, who was the character in this story? Was it me, or was I just following some sort of wild man? The Western man's connection with the wild man has been disrupted or interrupted for centuries now, and a lot of fear has been built up. Every angel is dangerous, says Rilke, so some fear is appropriate, but knowing nothing is not appropriate. Rather than look outside for more money, more value, more success, more beauty, more perfect wives or husbands, we could look at the traces that remain within us. This is dignity. This is our true nature that lives within all of us. Our trace of the wild man is the spontaneity we have preserved from childhood, and so it could be called beginner's mind, where we always look from a fresh and open perspective. This beginner's mind refers to having an attitude of openness, eagerness, and lack of preconceptions, so that we embrace the unexpected. The world lives in a closed mind state, and is associated with thinking as oneself as an expert. But in the beginner's mindset, we are open to new ideas, approaches, and see every moment as a fresh start. A little dance could be helpful in the middle of an argument, or what may be needed is a completely incomprehensible haiku spoken loudly while in church. This is a less serious approach, and so this act of courage is a discovery of our dignity that reemerges. This wild man or wild woman has been preserved inside of us, and so we also feel a genuine friendliness towards the wilderness and nature, beyond the ego's desire for money, fame, or power. The dignity within us would never forsake the earth. Thoreau said, "In literature, it is only the wild that attracts us, and so it is the wild man who is the protector of the wilderness, the bugs, the critters, and the spotted owl. The wild man is the male protector of the earth. We realize this when we are remembering the wild man or wild woman in this same way. More than ever, we need to protect the earth, its creatures, the waters, the air, the mountains, the trees, and the wilderness. When we develop the inner wild man, he keeps track of the wild animals inside of us and warns us when they are liable to become extinct. The wild one in you is the one which is willing to leave the busy life and able to be called away." The wild man also represents the positive side of male sexuality. He is not to be clean-shaven out of shame, and his instincts have not been so suppressed as to produce rage that humiliates women. The wild man resonates with the hills, clouds, and oceans. The Native American has much wild man in him, and it comes out in love for ordinary things. As a Chippewa wild woman wrote, "Sometimes I go about pitying myself, and all the time I am being carried on great winds across the sky." The wild man is the door to the wilderness in nature. But we could also see the wild man in nature itself. The same has been said of the wild woman. Hermes, Apollo, and the Virgin may be above nature, but the wild man is nature. The wild man encourages and amounts to a trust in what is below. The wild man encourages a trust of the lower half of our body, our genitals, our legs and ankles, our inadequacies, the soles of our feet, the animal ancestors, the earth itself, the treasures in the earth, the dead long buried there, and the underworlds to which we descend. As the Tao Te Ching says, water prefers low places, which is a true wild man's book. The wild man can only come to full life inside when the man has gone through the serious disciplines suggested by taking the first wound, doing kitchen and ashes work, creating a garden, bringing wild flowers to the holy woman, experiencing the warrior, moving through the red, the white, and the black kingdom, learning to create art, and receiving the second heart. The wild man doesn't come to full life through being natural. The ecstasy comes after a journey, after discipline imposed on ourselves, and after grief. We must laugh and we must sing. We are blessed by everything. Everything we look upon is blessed. The wild man then, through his disciplines, prepares an emotional body that can receive grief, ecstasy, and spirit. He prepares matter for a transformation. As the ancient stories tell us, Sophia descends from the upper eons down onto this planet and got caught in matter. As a result, we can find Sophia, or that golden fairy, in every piece of bark and every stone or feather. The wild man is a friend of Sophia, that golden fairy. As Rumi says, everyone who is calm and sensible seems to the world insane. We should also remember that the wild man's energy is that energy which is conscious of a wound. The wild man's qualities include the love of spontaneity, association with wilderness, honoring of grief, and respect for risks, which may frighten many people. These qualities do not seek the ordinary life of striving for money, fame, and worldly success. Rather, the wild man prefers the possibility of intensity, even though it entails risk of failure or insanity. We are those risk takers, those who would rather journey through hell for the sake of growth than to live comfortably in heaven. The wild man is part of a company or a community in the psyche, and it would be foolish to concentrate on him exclusively. The psyche is a whole community of beings, and this is what it is called to be a grown man. There are 7 key aspects to the grown man, and so they are the king, the warrior, and the lover as we've described him as an artist in the garden. Of course the wild man is an aspect, and so we'll break down the others that may have been more hidden. The trickster is what we'll call the 5th being. This trickster energy seems to be stored in the North American soil more than any other continent in the world. Native Americans have developed outrageous coyote stories, and Sitting Bull was a Heoki all his life. The trickster does not go with the flow, but his job is to reverse it so that the large energy continues to move. This would be the elegance of Hermes. The 6th being is the alchemist, the mythologist, or the cook. He knows how long cooking should go on, and how to move from one stage to another. This is also known as the magician or the magus. At the highest level, he is a shaman. He deals with energies of the invisible world, and for that reason, one could say that mathematicians are also magicians. And sometimes, when a man's emotional body is severely crippled, be it in childhood or later in life, the magician survives. That pure energy, not as damaged as the emotions, figures things out and ascends to keep us sane. Perhaps the magician's wise ascension is the way the native man gets born. This alchemist is then a great blessing. He moves beyond the screen of our story invisibly, sending the young man into the garden, no matter what the king has to say. The 7th being is what I call the grief man. I believe there is a special figure in men who leads them down into one of their greatest strengths, which is the power to grieve. There's a grief in men that has no cause. Yet in our culture, a man gets very little permission to grieve. And so, with that, we are ready to turn to the last scene of the story, in which the masculine and the feminine come together at last. Upon walking out of the deep forest, I ascended to the kingdom of the spirit, to the high castle, where the golden maiden would be waiting. There I found a great wedding feast in the making. The old king called me in and said, "Are you the one who appeared with the red turban and the horns, who was able to put Satan back in the cage?" "I am." And so I showed him the golden key that I had locked the dragon with. And if you need more evidence, you can look at the wound of the ancient serpent that bit me long ago, that allowed me to pass through the underworld. If you can perform feats of that magnitude, you are obviously not a gardener's boy. "Who is your father, may I ask?" said the old king. "I am the son of a noble family." "It's clear that I am in debt to you. Whatever I have in my power that will please you, I will give," said the king. "Well," I paused, "I'd suggest that you give me your daughter, the golden maiden, as my wife." "She's outside on the balcony. You can ask her if you'd like," said the old king. And so I walked out to the balcony in the high kingdom, and there I saw the golden maiden when I was overjoyed. But once I got closer, I realized how long she'd been waiting. "My love, I've come back." At first she didn't speak. "Have we run out of time? Has it been more than 7 days?"
"No."
She paused.
But I was confused, because I had to wonder if I was supposed to give up on us when you never came back. And so I began to dream of the man I was meant to marry, and so I envisioned the highest feelings of love. When I reflected on this deep love, it broke my heart, because this wasn't what I felt in the old versions of us. Now I realize that I had to wait and make room for the new versions of who we've become to feel the complete wholeness of true love,"
said the golden maiden. "I am here now, and tell me, what do you feel?"
"When you were gone, I went to a temple, and there I reflected on that feeling of true love, and how I wanted to bring that essence into my life. That's when I realized I was not yet the version of myself who was ready to meet my ideal partner, and so I understood that my true lover would only appear when I became the highest version of myself."
The golden maiden paused.
"Nothing was lost, only found. I feel that I've become her now. I feel independent, brave, and strong. I feel calm, easeful, and graceful. And I feel beautiful in both inner and outer ways. I finally feel connected to my own higher self, and so I'm ready for my true love as you've come home just before the end of the 7th day. Perhaps we only leave, so we may once again arrive, to get a bird's eye view of what it means to be alive. For there's beauty in returning. Oh, how wonderful, how strange, to see that everything is different, and to know it's you and I who have changed."
"And I have done as the king asked of me, and I've put Satan in his cage. I've done everything to become my higher self, so I propose that our wedding occurs on December 28th. Now the golden maiden laughed and said,
"I like the way you don't beat around the bush. I already knew you were no gardener's boy from your horns."
Now she came closer and kissed me. When her lips touched me, she cultivated a golden glow. Why, I felt this feeling before. This was the golden fairy I had come to know. "You're her. You're the fairy that led me far below,"
"I know,"
said the golden maiden. And so, when the wedding was set to begin, my mother and father were among those who were invited to the wedding, along with both our families, and everyone felt great joy. When the wedding was underway, while all the guests were sitting at the table for the marriage feast, suddenly the music broke off at once, and the doors swung open. I turned my head to the entrance where the commotion had come from. A great white buffalo appeared as a baronial king and entered accompanied by a procession of many attendants. He walked up to me and embraced me as the young groom. "Is it you?"
I am Iron John, the white buffalo, who through an enchantment became turned into a wild man. You have freed me from that enchantment,"
he said. A moment later, as I peered into his eyes, then his form changed in a way I could not understand. "It is you, Merlin!"
"And now, all the treasure that I own will from now on belong to you,"
said Merlin. "Wait,"
"What is it?"
he asked. "What good is the treasure for me if our world is not free? I seek no treasure for myself, but rather all people, creatures, and plants are in desperate need. How could I claim the treasure? This journey does not belong to me. There must be a way to support all beings upon this earth for the great relief of suffering. Please, Merlin, we must use your treasure to support this earth with spiritual nourishment. Surely you know the way to share these ultimate resources."
"If there is a will, then there is a way, but we cannot do this on our own. We will need something like a spiritual tribe in order for this spiritual nourishment to be conveyed,"
said Merlin. "Alas, look at the sixth and soon-to-be seventh path, into the great churches. The way home has been connected through the kingdom of the body, the kingdom of the mind, the kingdom of the spirit, where we have an opening for all beings to pass."
"Then the oracles were right. Keeping the treasure for an individual will never be the correct response. Let us open the seventh seal, and from then on, history will call this the Great Renaissance,"
said Merlin. "Maybe this is something we can pray for, but you just don't ever know what's going to happen. I guess that's why it's kind of fun. I can't guarantee we'll be able to do this, but we're going to try and live the dreams we imagine." And so where one story ends, the next begins. The Golden Maiden and I would walk down the aisle towards a new breakthrough, and with only 2 words, both the Golden Maiden and I agreed when we said, "I do." I feel that every curse holds a blessing. That's how I was called to this very wedding. And this time, I didn't need to make a wish, because fate was sealed by 2 lovers and a kiss. Now remember, in divine time, things appear to happen quickly, but in the kingdom of the body and mind, this may take a few years. The intuition always knows when it's right, for it's simple to recognize when true love appears.